What's up, brothers? Hugh Halter here again. Just woke up from a Sunday afternoon nap watching the Cleveland Browns and the Pittsburgh Steelers. I thought, I wonder what type of video it would be if I don't even try to think it through. We just go right from nap to video. So that's what we're doing today. I'm a little tired because I was up last night late. Because I was finishing my mail-in vote. That's right, Hugh Halter has already voted, and I licked the envelope and sealed it and poured myself a stiff glass of water right afterwards. And I don't know, I felt a little empty, I'll be honest with you. It's probably the emptiest I've felt voting, but I was trying to give respect to the office of being a peasant, a citizen of the United States, and just do my duty. But yeah, I don't know if you're feeling that way, but we're 2 weeks from this election. The world again is losing its mind this week. I can't even watch late night because there's so much humor about the miseries of this election. And I'm reading magazines at night just to get to bed, or watching, a little extra credit for you if you're having trouble sleeping out of stress and anxiety. Watch the comedian Sebastian Maniscalco. Just watch some video, get on his podcast, laugh your face off right before you go to bed. You'll be able to sleep. But anyway, I think I'm a little bit emptier in the political vote this year because I don't really think it matters who I vote for. Some of you might think that I'm a little bit goofy, but it seems that many people are feeling very similar, that there's something wrong with not just men, maybe these two men, but something wrong with our system. I was actually reading an article from a friend of mine, very poignant article about the different types of leaders. And I think he was juxtaposing one of the head leaders in New Zealand as a great leader, a woman, and why she is so much different than the leadership that seems to be exhibited in America. And he was saying it's not really about the people, it's about the system that creates the people, that good systems actually create good leaders. And he was talking about how the system over there is not quite as set up around money or personality or power. There's a little bit less of that than what we experience in America, that our American system is almost entirely now based on money and power and personality. And so it's a system failure. So we're going to continue to get leaders that are not going to be able to land the plane for us in America. And so anyway, I think a lot of people are feeling a little bit weird this year voting because of the loss of hope in our system. So if that's you, maybe you will come to my side and begin to put your hope in something that's outside the system. And I say that seriously because I'm full of hope. I really am. I get to travel the world and see people do pretty cool stuff. And my hope is in the city of God, as we call it. Jesus talked about his people, the church, being like a city on a hill, almost like a city within a city, where inside his city that operates by kingdom principles, it's not based on money or power or greed. It's based on humility and generosity and all sorts of qualities that everybody would give their right arm for right now. So I have a lot of hope in that because I see it all over the place. And I'm going to actually read today for you a little excerpt from a book that I'm writing with a friend. And just might be interesting for you because, we're Isaiah 58. There's all sorts of stuff related to our work in the world and issues of injustice and poverty. And I know, sometimes it's really hard to see yourself transitioning to a way of life or way of thinking where you can be a part of that. But God's giving some amazing promises of blessing if we will begin to take this stuff seriously. So I wanted to read a story about what was called the Dawn Settlement, and it's just going to be a little excerpt here, but we put on Cheryl's glasses today. And I just said I was sitting in a yoga cafe on a cold January morning in Ferguson, Missouri. Some of you know Ferguson because it's right now, it's the epicenter for racial tension and communications and writing and the whole thing. It's just a very important part of the globe right now. And that's just 7 miles south of us where we're at right now. So I was sitting in a yoga cafe on a morning with young man named Taylor McCall, who I'm writing this book with. Another was named Jonathan Tremaine. If the name Ferguson didn't initially jump out at you, it's because right now many call it the birthplace of the modern justice movement in America. On August 9th, 2014, an 18-year-old Michael Brown was killed by a white police officer. And in the days to follow, the town erupted in riots, news coverage, national focus. Since then, citizens from cities around our country have been emboldened to stand up for a long, bloody, contentious, systemic problem of racial injustice and all the social ills that fall between these ghetto issues that have plagued and discolor the Christian heritage in our country. JT is one of thousands of young African-American leaders who have put hand to plow toward what he calls an organization that he started called Civil Righteousness. Putting hand to plow isn't just a euphemism. Although JT travels the U.S. facilitating prayer, reconciliation, and education around racial justice issues, he was also meeting with Taylor and I to get some coaching on starting the only coffee shop in Ferguson. Just one building that was used to be a coffee shop. It was closed down for many years, and so JT had come up to see what we were doing in Alton, just a little bit north, and got an idea that that would be really important down in Ferguson. So he was just coming up to get some coaching with us. And as we were sitting there, he began to tell us a story that I had never really drawn lines between, and I just want to share it with you. He told us about the original Uncle Tom. Obviously, you've heard that name. His name was Josiah Henson. He was the original, okay? Josiah was born into slavery in Port Tobacco, Maryland in 1789, and in 1830 he escaped to Ontario, Canada, and set his abolitionist calling into a community and family that was called the Don Settlement in Don, Ontario. This community was both a refuge for escaping slaves, but was built out as a laborer's school to help slaves develop a trade. The Don Settlement's purpose statement was to cultivate the entire being and elicit the fairest and fullest possible development of the physical, intellectual, and moral powers, and to provide Black Canadians the skills they needed to prosper and to disapprove the racist beliefs. He was building a comprehensive kingdom ecosystem so that ex-slaves could live independent lives inside an independent or interdependent community, church, right? The Don Settlement grew as a school, a trade, an institute, a mill, a brickyard, a farm, and a church. At its height, the community cared for over 500 residents and served as the inspiration for Harriet Beecher Stowe's groundbreaking book called Uncle Tom's Cabin that was published in 1852. As you'll see, the story is a clarion prophetic call for the church to be an abolitionist freedom movement out of the dominant Babylonian culture that we now find ourselves in. And so we're going on to talk about what we call the free market church, that we believe that all the functions of ministry are to be done free in the world, that God's given his Holy Spirit to us. He gives us leadership gifts. Ephesians 4 talks about the apostolic gift, the prophetic gift, the evangelist gift, the shepherd and teaching gift, and it's given to leaders around the world so that they can equip all of God's people to do all the works of ministry. So all the works of ministry can be done for free. So sometimes I say church is free. Sometimes we make it more expensive, but the point of that is that the church therefore can enter the market. It can consolidate funds and resources, and as you read in Acts, that they would sell their assets and their land, and they would put it all into a big bucket, and then they would take care. It said in early Christian communities, nobody had any needs. So you talk about how the church spread. It was because people heard about this other city, this other network of people that Man, if you can get inside their network, they just treat people differently. They develop people, they equip people, they care for people, they resource people, and anybody can get in there, but they're serious. And so this is kind of the idea of free market church, is that um, God's church, you and I, are people all over the world, that regardless of the system that we're under at the time, regardless of the empire or the rulers of the empires that we live under, um, maybe hopefully we can put some hope in them someday. But when we're in seasons where on both sides we could rip the country apart because we're battling for our leader who can't land the plane, who can't fix the world, that we can look to brothers and sisters and we can band together in our communities and we can actually build a city that the world looks at and goes, man, I'm glad you guys are here. So now I want to go back and I want to read the passage that we've been in for quite a while now. And I want to read it in a different translation for you. And maybe it'll just begin to, I don't know, it just sounded different to me. And it sounded more hopeful and doable. So it says this: if you get rid of unfair practices, quit blaming victims, quit gossiping about other people's sins, if you're generous with the hungry and start giving yourselves to the down and out, and if your lives will begin to glow in the darkness, your shadowed lives will be bathed in sunlight. Love that. I will always show you where to go, God says, and I will give you a full life in the emptiest of places. Firm muscles, strong bones. You will be like a well-watered garden, a gurgling spring that never runs dry. You'll use the old rubble of past lives to build anew. You'll rebuild the foundations from out of your past. It's a great hope for guys, for some of us, maybe all of us. Our life in Jesus, the possibility of it is that we're taking, or God's really taking us out of the rubble, and he just begins to rebuild things. So now we know how to help rebuild other brothers and sisters that we come into contact with. So you'll be known as those who can fix anything. You'll restore old ruins, rebuild and renovate, make the community livable again. A guy came into Post Commons. Some of you, obviously, you know that when we came to this town, God gave us this building and we began to restore it. It had been boarded up for 60 years. And we were essentially building, I guess the vision was very similar to Josiah Henson. We were trying to build a comprehensive kingdom ecosystem, but we had to start by, fixing a building. We had to literally renovate and make, as it says, that you'll be known as people that make the community livable again. We had to start there. That was like the entrance as missionaries or as the people of God's city into the city of Alton. We had to start by restoring literal buildings, and it began to give some hope. Some guys came in the other day. We had just opened up, so this was our third day reopening here after our fourth or fifth reopening during the COVID season. Kind of going back and forth. All of a sudden we're opening, this family comes in from out of town, and they flagged me over. They were out on our front patio, and they said, "What's the story of this place?" And I just began to tell them our story, and the one guy actually started to cry. And he goes, just when you tell me the story that your family came here and they didn't know what to do, but you cared about the city, and then you were given a building and then you restored it and you turned it into this, he says, that's the most inspiring thing I've seen in my adult life. And I said, well, it doesn't feel that inspiring to us, but I realize it really is inspiring when you take broken things and you try to rebuild it with a hope of somehow lifting people up a little bit. We don't have any grand visions here in Alton, but when we see what other people are doing around the country and the world to actually, do this stuff, we find that it is inspirational to people because they don't see it very often. So, man, you guys think we could really take this serious? Like, we've heard God, 2/3 of the scriptures are about helping the poor. You think at whatever age we are? I went till I was mid-30s before I really went, oh, that's in my job description as a Christian. I always thought it was for those super weird, compassionate Christians that they're the ones that help people. And mid-30s before I went, oh, actually, that's part of my identity. That's the city that I live in, and I get to be a part of this. So I don't know where you're at. Maybe, on the sixth time we've read the scripture, we start to go light bulb, light bulb. What's cool, I'm going to jump right to the very end of this passage. Someday we'll get to it. But it says, if you will do these things, I will make you feast on the inheritance of your ancestor Jacob. That's the last promise. What the heck is with Jacob? If you remember the story, you have Abraham, Isaac, Jacob. Abraham's given the promise of God that someday the whole earth will be blessed through him and his descendants. And so he has Isaac, and then Isaac has Jacob and Esau. They get in a fight. Jacob sneaks sort of the inheritance away from Esau. Esau goes out to kill Jacob, so Jacob's on the run, and he has to fall asleep on this rocky road. He grabs some boulders to lay his head on, and he has a dream, and it's what we call Jacob's ladder. I know you've probably heard of that, but the dream was of the angels, of God himself going up and down, communicating and relating with humanity. And so Jacob wakes up, and he calls the ground that he's laying on, this rocky, jagged path, he calls it Bethel, which means the place or the house of God. And as you think about all those cool scriptures that we read about God making us a well-watered garden and strengthening our bones, that he'll always answer us when we ask him for help, to be given back your inheritance, or to say to men, just as God was trying to explain to Jacob, even though you're lying on a rocky path right now, you are right where I want you to be, and I want to commune, I want to relate with you, and I want to pull you into what I'm doing in the world. This is the great promise of the Christian man, honestly, is that we get to go beyond the religion, right? We've already talked through, God doesn't care about our religious stuff. He doesn't care that we go to church and do all the stuff if we are not involved in what he's doing in the world and bringing hope to people. And so I just want to end with that. I want you to really think about this week being the week that the light bulb goes on, that you can no longer, you just need to lay the sword down if you are fighting for a personality or a person to fix things. At some point you have to go, if you're a Christian, you have to go, I no longer put my hope in any other person. I definitely don't put it in a system, a political system. I can't put it even in a religious system. I can only hope that there's a God that wants to relate to humanity, that he wants to build a city within our cities that represents the ethic and the ethos and the activity of the kingdom of God, and that we men get to wake up in the morning and sign in for duty and go, God, we want to be a part of that. So wherever you want to take us, whatever you want to do with our businesses, everything converges and is leveraged under this idea of helping those that need help. I mean, it really is. And we try to take, the ethos is we should try to take as little as we possibly need along the way. We begin to store up our treasures in heaven. We begin to get generous again, loose-handed with our resources and all of our assets. And we really finally say, God, your kingdom is greater than my kingdom. And I'm going to no longer keep pumping up the portfolio. I'm not going to wake up and wring my hands or freak out about my investments. I'm going to work. I'm going to work, as Josiah Henson did. I'm going to create. I'm going to be an entrepreneur. I'm going to build things. I'm going to restore things in hopes that it gives people some sense of hope for God's presence in the world. So, what we're doing in Alton is small. What you will do in your city will probably be small, but God just does cool stuff with that. So maybe think about this week what the entrepreneurial, creative voice of God might be to you if he's coming up and down your ladder, what he's going to be asking you to do. And we're going to have some good questions this week about that. So take care. We'll see you next week.